Hey everybody, welcome to another hobby break video. It's been a little while since I did one of these, but I caught some inspiration recently from a handful of videos that I've watched on YouTube. And I kind of had this project that I was working on and just kind of evolved and kind of took a sort of a life of its own over time. And so I'm going to show you here kind of the final product, so to speak. And then I'm going to walk through how I did all this stuff. So everything here is sort of handmade by myself. And I'll have links to some of the videos that provided some of the inspiration and some of the tutorials and the hands-on part of it. But basically, sort of the gist of this is this entire table that I'm going to show you was done for just at $100. And it was probably about 25 hours or so of work. So something that I feel like is kind of attainable. It's going to look fairly decent. I'm not like the most adept terrain creator at this time. But it's going to fill up your table. I've got like a whole 6 foot by 4 foot table here filled, like too much. Like you could play a game on this, but it would be lots and lots of terrain and line of sight blocking and all that kind of good stuff and lots of sort of fiddly movement. So you certainly could play on a table this full. But this is definitely a good supplement with lots of variety and things. So let's jump in and kind of give you the overall general look of everything, and then I'll walk you through. And the other kind of gist of this is it really takes no skill to do this, no artistic skill or anything. Anybody could do this, really. So I just wanted to kind of share this whole kind of project with you. It sort of started off with one thing, and I had extra bits for this, and I was like, what could I use these for? And that grew into a thing. And I'm like, okay, let's keep this at $100 budget and, reasonable time and like little to no skill / effort, even though, time, definitely there was some time involved. But you don't really need a lot of artistic or creative skill, I think, to do this. So let's jump in and look at the final result, and I'll kind of walk you back through how I did it, and then go from there. Okay, it's kind of hard to get the whole 6 foot by 4 foot in a single shot there. So just kind of zoom around a little bit. Now, the main thing that I started with here are these foam, and this is actually insulation foam you can get at Home Depot or other kind of hardware store. And these are all modular and stuff. You can see I just put that there to maybe build a little bit taller of a peak and so on. So I started with that, and then I had some leftover pieces here. So I built these foam ruins on top of these foam board things. So I just put them all here in the center, but these are all sort of modular. You could kind of put these out into various different areas, and you can see the little bits of moss and things here that I added onto that to make it not completely totally barren, a little bit of life in this wasteland. It's not a lot of extra moss, so I got these armature pieces here from Wooden Scenics, got them off of Amazon, and so used up a little bit extra moss that I had. So kind of started with these large mountainous hill kind of things, and then had some extra foam for the ruins, and then extra moss and so on, extra rocks. So I kind of, like I said, it kind of took off a life of its own. So let's jump into a little bit of kind of a walkthrough of how I did it. And again, I'll have links if you really, want to see exactly physically watch somebody do some of this. I'll have links to that stuff there. But again, super dead simple to do all of this. You wouldn't believe it. Okay, so the first thing you can see here is, of course, the pink foam. You can get this at Home Depot. This is $20 for an 8 foot by 4 foot sheet. And it's kind of perforated, so I just broke it up into little sort of slats there. It comes right off. You just kind of pop it and it breaks pretty quickly. And then I started to carve it up. And you can see here I've carved up all of the little pieces that you saw on the table. These are now pink. And I just kind of created just a bunch of different shapes. You could be real methodical about it and kind of create shapes that have a certain thing, but I was just very organic with it, created little pieces, big pieces, circular pieces, weirdly shaped pieces, and so on. And once I was done, I had a whole bunch of leftovers here, and I just threw this in the box. And I was like, hey, this is a bunch of waste here, these little extra bits. I could have built really tiny kind of rocky pieces and stuff. I decided not to do that, and I kept these for some of the ruins that you see. And here, we're going to kind of zoom in on this picture a little bit. You can see the edges now of those pink sort of circular shapes that I cut out. And the way that you get this sort of craggy edge is you take like a little X-Acto knife or some kind of hobby knife, and then you score it vertically up and down like every couple of centimeters. Just do it kind of haphazardly, a whole bunch, all the way around the edge. And then do a couple of horizontal long lines all the way across, not too many of those. And then you just take like a metal ruler or something and grab it along the edge and just drag it all over the edge. And then bam, this is what you've got here with that sort of edge there. And again, I'll have the first link that you'll see will be exactly how to do that if you're uncomfortable, working with a knife or a ruler. But it's very, very simple. Score it up a whole bunch, drag the ruler all the way around, and it looks like a craggy edge to a hill or a mountain. And then here is the waste. So I used up most of the foam, although picture's a little bit of a lie. I probably threw away about twice this much. So once I was done using the extra for the ruins, I had about this much again left over in sort of debris and detritus and threw that away. So I used up most of that insulation foam. The next thing I used here was this Aleene's original tacky glue. Now in some of the videos that I'll link and a lot of other people, they will use lots of different glue. And so I just used this basically throughout most of the entire process, this along with some super glue. A lot of people will use hot glue and have a hot glue gun and different things like that, or use like a pin it with toothpicks and all that kind of stuff. But I am sort of a big fan of this glue. This is sort of like just Elmer's white glue, and then they also have a spray glue, which is kind of the same thing. So here I went to Michael's and got these 2 different size rocks. Now Michael's was having a sale on a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff was 50% off. So that's part of why I kept this right under $100. But if you have ever visited Michael's, they often have big sales like that. So you just gotta have to like wait a week or 2, and there'll be whole sections of their store that are 40 to 50% off. And so for both of these little plastic jars of different size rocks, it was $7 for both of those. And you can kind of see I sort of am working backwards here. I actually glued a lot of these big rocks on. I used the tacky glue to glue some of the pink pieces together, and then glued on the little bitty rocks and the big rocks and so on. And then here's a little bit more of an evolved piece there. You can still see that kind of Pink Panther marking on there, and some extra glue and so on. Now you're gonna see me do the sand second, and I should have done the sand first, but I was just kind of getting excited and I forgot to buy sand. And now we're caught up to the sand, and here you can get this at like a Home Depot or a Lowe's in the United States or some other hardware store. This is Secrete. This is a 50-pound bag of sand. It cost $5. I didn't even make a dent in this for this whole project. So I could probably do this project, 5, 6, 7 times over and not have to get any more sand to do it. And again, I didn't mention this before, I am working out in the garage. You definitely need a spot where you can be messy. This isn't something I would necessarily do inside of an apartment or anything, unless you've got sort of a designated space that you can be messy and then clean up. So I just use a little throwaway Tupperware thing, a little plastic jug that I have around for mixing paints and stuff, and pour sand in there. And then you just kind of rub that white tacky glue all over the place with your fingers, just kind of rub it all over, and then just pour the sand on there and then knock it off, and then everything else will stay. And the excess, again, you can just sweep up and put it right back into that bag of sand. So here you can see I squirt the glue all around, and then after I'm done mushing it around with my fingers, then I'm going to pour the sand on it. There you go. And see, now there's a bunch of sand. You can see the other rocks that I glued on prior. You can it's probably easier to do the sand first and then glue the rocks on after. But either way, it seemed to kind of work. So there we go. We've got the final shot there. And then we have a whole bunch of them. So this is all the different pieces sort of laid out on my garage floor, and with all the sand and the rocks and everything, now it's ready for some paint. So at this point, you can see that you just cut out a bunch of shapes, score it with the edges and the ruler, and pour a bunch of glue and rocks and crap on it. And then now you're at a pretty decent stage. So here I just got some really cheap craft paint. I'm kind of partial to folk art, but you can get Americana and all kinds of different brands. These are the little brown bottle. You can see those are $1. And then the larger bottles, I think they're like $4.50. You will use a chunk of black if you do the exact same color scheme as me. The brown and the white and the grays that we'll see, you don't use very much of that at all. It's mostly black. So here is a piece that's been drying overnight. The whole process is, I should have said, is you cut the foam out and then glue the foam together. That will glue pretty quick. And then you can do the rocks and the sand and then let that all dry overnight. So you want to kind of build and construct it and then be ready to paint it on the next day. And so now we've covered the entire thing, just solid black. Just get in there and just cover it all. Cover all the little nooks and crannies of the little crags and everything. And then once that's dry, that's going to be another night to dry, I would say, just to be safe. Depending on kind of the weather and temperature, you could probably come back a few hours later. After that, then I just dry brush it with gray. Really light, easy dry brush. Don't get too heavy with it, but just cover the entire thing with gray. After the gray, we can see now I've done a little bit of that brown. That's kind of a coffee latte brown. I think you want a golden brown. That was in one of the videos I saw, and I thought that was kind of a nice color, just to kind of subtly accent it a little bit, just to give it a little bit of color variation. But you could do all kinds of stuff. You could go really brown with this. You can even put grass on it. I didn't do that, so you can actually cover the tops with the grass. That's one of the examples in one of the videos linked below. So you can kind of mix and match this, but I like this because this is actually, I think, going to look good in the snow, even in a green mat, and it's here in the wasteland and the brown mat. So it's going to look good in a variety of situations. I can reuse it. And then very, very carefully, just do a tiny bit of white dry brushing, just to kind of get some of the edges, little tips of the rocks and things. Don't do very much at all. You know, as much as I probably dry brushed, you know, carefully and lightly with the gray, just do like 4 or 5 little strokes on a side, you know, and then turn it around and do 4 or 5 more. Just being very particular about little areas. Don't do a ton. So now is the other glue I'm going to be using. This is just some super glue I got down at the local game store. And I've got that moss that you can see. Now again, these were also on sale. It was $7 for both of these bags. And I got sort of a brown, sort of dead moss kind of thing, and then a green one. And then I just simply laid down a little super glue and then pulled out little moss chunks. And the moss is weird because it has like sort of a thick and full side, and then the other side of a chunk that you pull out be sort of stringy and gangly. So you can kind of, you know, use whatever you like there. And here is a little bit of a setup. A few days ago I set up with just some stuff laying around, and this is sort of the completed of just the craggy bits. And I had some other, you know, I just laid down some of my Age of Sigmar figures all over the place just to give you a sense of scale and stuff like that. And you can see the rocks here look very nice. You know, it kind of breaks it up. And so you can get as sort of varied as you want with it. You can make them very, very rocky. You use lots and lots of rocks or lots of moss, or cover them in snow. You could cover them in the green flock, you know, the grass that you can get from Games Workshop or other people, and just kind of cover each of the tops of each of these. So here's kind of a final shot, and then we're going to move into what am I going to do with the leftovers now. I've spent, I think it was right around $50 at this point with everything, but now I've got a bunch of leftovers, so I'm going to go ahead and grab this black foam core. I like this stuff. Now it will warp, but there is a way to fix the warp, which I'll talk about. This is cheap. You can get this at the dollar store. It's rare to find the black at the dollar store, but you can also get it at Michael's for a few bucks. I think this was $7 or $8 for about 3 of these. And these aren't really huge ones, but you know, it's enough for this little extra project to augment that. And so here I've dug into the little ruins, the extra bits that I left aside. And then here, instead of using the ruler or doing all the scoring, I just kind of went like I was peeling an onion on the side. So I would just kind of peel away from myself, almost like peeling an apple. So just push the knife away from me. And it creates a different kind of jagged edge there. There's no scoring here. And then often I would leave one of these edges flat. So you can see here, I've moved on to the next step. That bottom edge there, that's very flat. So I can glue that down there to the foam core. And then I went ahead and scored up and down, left and right, just a kind of sporadic on both sides of the foam. And then I dug into it again with the knife. This time not with a ruler, but just the knife again, just kind of scoring, you know, back and forth. It kind of has a little bit of a brick, a little bit more, maybe slightly of a modern feel right now, but we'll keep going. And so you can see a little bit of an arrangement of these ruins while they're still pink. And then I got this Rust-Oleum filler primer. This you can get from Home Depot. This is good for spraying on an MDF and wood. Now some of the different primers you can see on the left there's some Death Guard green. I did use a few of these pieces to see how they would react. And some of them will melt actually this foam a little bit, but this filler primer doesn't. It really gets in there and it kind of acts as a nice protective seal. The other thing you can do if you don't want to do gray is you can sort of coat it with glue and then paint over the top of that. So the glue acts sort of a protectant for it. But I just sprayed it with this Rust-Oleum filler primer. And there you can see it just after it's been primed. I think it's still a little bit wet there. And then I took some of that black paint that I painted the mountains with, really watered down, basically as a wash, and just really got in there and sort of slathered it around a bit. And to let that dry overnight. And then now we've got our foam core that we're going to cut. And we're going to kind of arrange this. You can see this sort of mid-progress here. I've got these glued down. I use a little bit of the super glue to get these down, and then kind of mixed around. The glue is sort of in process, as you can see, around, and then I laid down the sand and the rocks in the same way that I did with the other pieces. But now these are nice because you can see these are modular, and I can throw these down, and then you can just say, okay, this whole area here provides cover. So for Warhammer games especially, you know, okay, they get +1 to their save if they're just anywhere in the zone, because maybe they're ducking and diving behind the ruins. And then I did use, I don't know that you need to do this. I felt like I did because it felt like the rocks were still a little bit loose. I actually put down some tacky spray, and you can see there's actually some rocks that are on top of the ruins and stuff. So it's a very messy kind of ordeal. So I sprayed that down on top of that. And these are just some examples here in process. And then we go ahead and we paint now all the sand and everything black again. So you can see, you get a good sense of that. And this is what is a little bit is going to warp the foam core. The glue has some water in it. The black paint has some water, and that is going to warp it, but it's very, very simple to fix. And here we've got a little bit more complete pieces. I added a little bit of the moss. I've now dry brushed, similar with the gray and the brown and the white a little bit on the ruins, but mostly on the ground itself. The moss is nice. You still have a kind of a wasteland feel, but just that little bit of color helps kind of make everything pop. Again, I said these are warp a little bit, and the way that you fix the warp is you just turn them upside down, and then you just get some water and paint it on the back side of those and let those dry, and it will just bend that warp right back. And you might have to do it once or twice, but it happens very, very quickly. Within a case of like an hour or two, it will pull it right back, and it'll lay nice and flat there on your table. So it's not the end of the world if it warps. But you do want to try to be careful with the amount of water that you saturate these foam boards with. So the last little bit, I had some money left over once I decided to make this run at $100. So I figured out, let me search around a little bit, and I found a video, which I'll link below, about how to do trees, and lo and behold, it uses the same moss that I've used everywhere else. So I got these tree armatures here. These are from Woodland Scenics, got them from Amazon, about 15 bucks. And they come in this big old bag, and there's just, and you see they kind of come like this with a stand and then the base sort of connected to it on the sprue. And you just kind of clip that off and shave off the end a little bit. And then you just stick them right in there. You don't have to glue them. And then you're going to bend and twist and bend and yank all of these different branches in the trunk itself to kind of make it more natural and gangly. And here I've done all 12 of them. And this particular one there, it comes with 12. And they're all different heights and stuff and different amount of branches. So you got a bunch of dead trees now, which you could just use like this if you really wanted. And then you just stick the moss on with the super glue that I showed you before. Just lather the branch a little bit with the moss or with the super glue, and then attach the moss to it. And you can pull different bits of it. Again, you'll notice that this particular moss has real stringy bits and then real, kind of full bits. So you can kind of mess around with it. As you can see, there's still some dead branches and stuff sticking out. I did get some of this, I have some of this left over. This is about 10 bucks for a box of this grass if you have to buy it. And this is the Citadel Grass here. And if you zoom in a little bit, you can kind of see I just layered some glue on top of the moss tufts and then just sprinkle the grass off it and then knock it off, knock the excess grass back into the box and just add some extra little color. And then this is what I come up with. So I think I may go back in and add more flocking to this, but I don't know. I kind of like the mix of this. I've got enough that are full that I could use in the forest scenario versus some of these that are, don't have any. Anyway, we're back here to the table, and you can just kind of see, we'll zoom in a little bit there on the ruins. You can see the rocks and everything. So all of this whole full table, this is filled with terrain. There's really nowhere for your figures to move around if you were to use all this stuff. But now you've got like a ton of terrain and things like that you can make. Like I said, it's $100 and you'd be hard pressed to, fill up a table with all of this level stuff. And like I said, these are kind of nice because they can be used in a variety of things. I could see, using this in a 40K thing or a Frostgrave or Age of Sigmar. You can, like I said, these are kind of environment neutral so that you can put them on snow or on a blasted waste and all that stuff. So expect to see more of this terrain actually in the future. Okay, that's all I wanted to share. Thanks.